All right, 1, 2, 3. This is my Bible. It is Yah's word. It is the inspired, infallible word of Yah. It is a lamp unto my feet. Blessed are those who hear the word of Yah and keep it. I find out who I am in the pages contained herein. This is my Bible. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hope everyone is doing well. I'm going to skip any intros and get straight into it. Because I'm doing well. Today's message is going to be an uppercut. Now this is spiritual, not personal. Everybody say that with me. This is spiritual, not personal.
Amen.
And again, as I always say, this is what the Most High gives unto me. I be having some ideas of stuff I want to preach on, and then he'd be like, nah. Simple answer, nah. A lot of people are going to think that I'm taking shots at people from the pulpit, but that is not the case. So when it hits you, just know that it is spiritual, not personal. So today, we are going to focus on the Israelites in the wilderness. So we're going to go through and get some timelines, some features, and we're going to learn some stuff too. And there was a couple things I learned that I didn't know. So if I didn't know, safe to say you didn't know. And that's not to say that, I'm so smart, but I put forth effort to be smart. So that's all I'm saying. So Exodus chapter 1, verse 6 through 15. Now Joseph, who's this Joseph that they're talking about? It's not Jesus' stepdad. Joseph with the coat of many colors, Israel's favorite son. Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly, increased in numbers, and became so numerous that the land was filled with them. Now what land are they in? Egypt. Then a new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So this Pharaoh is afraid of the Israelites' numbers, and he's afraid of a war. If somebody's like, if they join their side, there's no way we can win. Verse 11. So they, who's they? The Egyptians, put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with harsh labor in brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all the harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly. So let's recap. First, it says that a king came into power to whom Joseph meant nothing. So if Joseph meant nothing to him, what do you think he felt about the God that Joseph served? Even less. How do you think he felt about Joseph's people? Because again, Joseph, by power of the Most High, is the reason why Egypt is the superior power that it is. Do we recall that? It was a famine. He stored up food, and all the neighboring countries came and paid for food. That built up Egypt's power. So he only views the Israelites as leeches onto their society. If you look at world history, whenever an atrocity is inflicted upon a group of people, it happens after the ruling power deems another group of people worthless or damaging to their society. If you think back when you learned about the Holocaust, you weren't paying attention in that class. You're too busy being cool and popular. But again, through the media, the Germans kept saying, those Jewish people, they're worthless. They're destroying our economy. We need to make Germany great again. And that's literally what this is. It's not me being political at all. You know, we had a visitor in our city yesterday. So we have uncovered that now things are tough on the Israelites, because the Israelites were doing well at the beginning when they first came into Egypt. They got the best land. They said Israel gets the best land. Israelites and Jacob. For some reason, we don't call him Israel, even though Yah changed his name to that. We don't listen to him. And he said, your name's no longer Jacob. But we still say, oh, Jacob. But they got the best lands and everything. But now things are tough. Now things are horrible. Let's see what happens next with our ancestors. Now we're going to fast forward past the killing of the Hebrew boys and go past Moses fleeing to Midian, because we know that story back and front, right? Exodus chapter 2, 23 to 25. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out. And their cry for people because of their slavery went up to Yah. Yah heard their groaning, and he had remembered, say remembered, remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Israel. So Yah looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. Now I want to point out to you that when you are going through something, just remember that Yah remembers you. He is concerned about you. Let's keep going through. That's going to touch somebody later on when they're going through something. Exodus chapter 5, 6 through 9. That same day, Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and overseers in charge of the people. So now this is when Moses has come and told Pharaoh to let his people go. Verse 7. And again, he's talking to the overseers. You are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw. But we require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce their quota. They are lazy. It's always funny that the slave drivers love to call the slaves lazy. That's always happened in world history. It's like, maybe you're the lazy one that doesn't want to do no work. They are lazy. That is why they are crying out, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Make the work harder for the people so that they keep working and pay no attention to the lies. When they say they're tired, they're lying. When they say they're thirsty, they're lying. So I want to lay down the groundwork about how horrible things are for the Israelites. They have cried out to who? They cried out to the Most High. Like, we hate it here. They are pleading with the Pharaoh to be let go. So we know the next part of the story, right? So then we get the 10 plagues, which Yah is showing that he is stronger than all the gods that the Egyptians serve. Because scripture continuously speaks about how Yah is the God above other what? Other gods. Other small g gods, as Pastor says. Interestingly enough, and I've made this point before, but it bears a reminder, Yah never says there are no other gods. He says, I'm above those other gods. The Bible is not a monotheistic book. Monotheistic meaning there's only one God. He constantly says, they're over there, and I'm better than them. I'm the living God. But when you look at it, the plague of the Nile is to show dominance over Hapi, the god of the Nile. The god Heket has the face of a frog. Then you get the plague of frogs. Geb, the god of dust, and then locusts come from the dust. Khepri, the god has the head of a fly. Then you have the swarm of flies. Hathor had the face of a cow and was the goddess of protection. Then Yah kills the livestock, namely the cows. Isis is the god of medicine. Then the plague of boils and sores. Nut, the goddess of the sky. Then hail came from the sky, which is not a normal weather thing that happens in Egypt. That's not normal here. When hail happens, we're like, whoa, man, that's a hailstorm. And we live in a winter place. Seth, the god of storms in disorder. locusts then get sent from the sky, Ra, the sun god, and then there's 3 days of darkness. And lastly, and we forget about this, lastly, Pharaoh himself, who is viewed as a deity. He is viewed as a god. And then there's the death of the firstborn. This God that you serve can't even protect his own son. This was not only to show the Egyptians how powerful Yah is. This is to show the Israelites how powerful Yah is. Because they don't know. Because what do the Israelites know? Oppression by the hands of the Egyptians. They don't. We're going to uncover this later. I'm not going to spoil it now. This is not only to show the Egyptians, but also the Israelites. All of these miracles occur, and the Israelites are eventually freed from their bondage. They're freed from their oppression that they cried out for. We are serving a living God that can deliver us from whatever bondage has ensnared us. The Israelites are now free to leave Egypt. So let's quickly recap. Things got really bad for the Hebrews in Egypt. Things got worse. Yah delivers them out of it, so they are on their way out. And every single time on their way out, they get a miracle that gets them out. We know this story, right? We don't have to read the whole book of Exodus today, do we? All right. You're like, I ain't trying to say that long. They have an exact interaction with Yah, separating them from their enemies. The pillar of cloud, the pillar of fire, separating them. And eventually, their Egyptians, their oppressors, get killed in the crossing of the sea. And this whole Exodus, if you will, it's the name of the book, was for them to go worship Yah on the mountain. That's what Moses told Pharaoh they wanted to do. He didn't tell Pharaoh the whole plan that to let us be free. He said, let us just go to the mountain and worship. That's all we want to do. But on the way to the mountain, those Hebrews don't know how to act. Let's go to Exodus chapter 6, 3 through 5. The Israelites said to them as in Moses and Aaron, if only we had died by Yah's hand in Egypt. There we sat around. I don't know much sitting that gets in. They talked about making bricks and stuff like that. I don't know how much sitting was detailed there, but okay. But you know, folks always change the story later on. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you brought us into the desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Then Yah said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them. People, we skip over this sentence here. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day, they are to prepare what they bring in, and then it's to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So let's recap what's happening here. The Israelites, because all they know how to do is complain. They're complaining about food, about pots of meat. I don't know. That doesn't even sound accurate. Why do you have pots of meat in the desert just sitting around? You don't got no refrigerator or nothing. Just sitting around. Eat it. They're complaining about food. All of these things Yah has done for them, yet they are complaining about the most minor aspect of their well-being. He delivered them out of slavery. He delivered them out of a war with the Egyptians. And they're concerned about their diet. They escaped the lashes of slavery, but they're like, yo, I'm hungry. Whatever, we should have brought them pots of meat instead of all this gold. And this is where we get the term daily bread, because Yah was producing bread for them each day. And he said, only take what you need. Don't get greedy. I'm going to test you in this and see who follows my directions and who does not. Then Yah, being a provider, provides something for them. Literally, a way out of no way. He then gives them instructions to see if they will listen. We know the story that they do not listen, and then some of them try to gather up some manna for later. Like, oh, I'm going to get hungry later on. I need me a little midnight snack when I wake up at 2 o'clock. Let's keep going, and we will touch base on the Israelites and their food complaints a little later. So they get to the mountain, because remember, this was the original plan, was to get to the mountain. Moses is on top of the mountain, getting the law and the commandments, and let's see what happens. Exodus chapter 32, verse 1. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses, who brought us up out of Egypt," so they at least give him credit. We don't know what happened to him. He gone. Now, this is an important detail that we gloss over. These Israelites do not know Moses, because Moses was royalty. Then he killed somebody, then he left for 40 years, right? We know that story? So then this dude comes back saying, yeah, we're going to go to a mountain and worship God. They're like, who are you again? The Israelites don't know him. He had been in Midian for 40 years and then came back. He had a wife and kids. And he was sent by the same God, in their minds, that hadn't talked to them for 400 years. None of the Israelites had heard from Yah for 400 years during all this slavery. Then this dude, that is a former oppressor, says, hey, yo, we're going to the mountain to worship him. You know that dude you heard about that Abraham liked? I talked to him. Come follow me. So we got to cut them a little slack about their complaint, because it's like, dude, this might have been your plan the whole time. I don't know you. Aaron, we know that's why they keep going to Aaron. So then this dude just comes around. But let's keep going. Now we know this part, but we're going to learn something that you never knew before. I guarantee you, at least 2 people will learn something. I think it'll be more, but I'm just going to say 2. Exodus chapter, go to the next verse, 2 through 6. Aaron answered them. So Aaron, who's the second in command, who's the one holding the staff and doing the things because Moses don't want to talk. They asked Aaron, make us a god. Aaron's like, all right. Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing, and bring them to me. So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed them and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fastening it with a tool. Then they said, these are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, tomorrow there will be a festival to Yah. That doesn't make sense, does it? It will in a moment. So the next day, verse 6. So the next day the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterward, they sat down to eat and drink and got up and to indulge in revelry. Now notice, in verse 5 it says, we will have a festival for Yah. But they just asked him to make other gods, right? This doesn't make any sense, because they just made a new God to give praise to. But he said, no, we're going to have a festival for Yah. But the last sentence tells us what we need to know. It mentions that they're going to get drunk and indulge in revelry. Now, the English word revelry means to get drunk and be loud. But the Hebrew word that's used here, every single other time in the Old Testament where that word is used, it means to mock someone or to make sport of someone. Every other time. So they're making a festival to mock Yah and to praise their new God. But again, this is what these Egyptians knew. We knew that these Israelites knew the Egyptians love their cows. Let's make a little baby cow. Because they created a new God and they made a festival mocking Yah. This is why Yah became so angry. He didn't just get angry because they made a little calf out of gold. They had a whole party about how he's whack. We make fun of the Israelites in this story, but we need to realize what they did here. They converted and became pagans. Yah wanted them to destroy them, but Moses pleaded on their behalf. Yah said, I will kill all of them down there, and I'll make a new nation with you. So Moses wanted to sacrifice himself for the Israelites, but Yah denied him that request. And if we fast forward approximately 1,100 years later, there is one like Moses who tries to not sacrifice himself, and Yah says, no, you got to. That's Jesus, in case no one picked that up. Remember when Jesus said, let your cup pass. I don't want to do this. But he ended up doing it. I mentioned that the Hebrews do not know how to act, but we don't know how to act. We lose our minds at the first sign of trouble. We lost our minds at the first sign of trouble. We are no longer walking in that. In Numbers chapter 11, there is a story of the Israelites complaining about their choice of food again. They were complaining about all the leeks and onions they used to have in Egypt, and they said we had all this great food at no cost. But remember, slavery is the cost. Building Pharaoh's pyramids and cities is the cost. Them leeks and onions aren't free. And they're crying out. But they're remembering the good stuff. They're remembering the pots of meat. They're remembering the leeks and the onions. They're remembering the whip. They're not remembering making bricks. They're not remembering all of their firstborn or their children being thrown into the Nile to be eaten by alligators. They never brought that up to Moses. But they brought up, oh, I remember things were great. But we do the same thing. So many people have escaped the bondage that they had. They escaped that abusive ex. But they only remember the positives. The Israelites said at no cost. But the cost was slavery. The cost was their oppression. The cost was them crying out to the Most High. So the Hebrews are complaining about eating manna. And then Yah provides them so much quail that they can't even count it. But while they're eating this new quail, they die. It says, while the meat is in their mouth, they die. Yah was so angry with their complaints. We have a problem in common with our ancestors here. We complain every step of the way. Every time something doesn't go our way, we complain as if nothing has ever gone our way. Yah has led you to what you previously prayed for and believed for. He is leading you to what you are currently believing for. But what is your attitude right now? Is your attitude that nothing ever goes your way? You can't remember the previous things, the previous blessings that he's put on you? You can only look at what's happening to you right now? But your attitude can cost you. Because the Israelites' attitude cost them. If you ask most historians, or if you ask Google Maps, the trip from Egypt to Canaan should have only taken between 6 and 11 days. Just because they did make some stops on the way. They did stop in Midian. People stopped and talked to them. There were some battles. There were a couple of things that stopped. But if you plug this in, you can do the drive. You got a car. I mean, you could. The way these countries are set up right now, can't just be driving through. But if you walked, it would take 147 hours if you walk nonstop. And that would be 6 days. But again, you got to stop and eat. You got to stop and sleep. All these different things. So let's just round up and say 11 days. But how long did it actually take? 40 years. So we went from 11 days to 40 years. 40, if a trip takes 11 days, if the trip took you 40 days, that would be frustrating enough. Because again, it should only take 11 days. So you'd be frustrated that you almost quadrupled your time, right? If it took 40 months, it would be devastating because it only should have been 11 days. Now 40 years now, that's insane. That's absurd. But it took 40 years because of all the complainers. Because that generation of complainers couldn't go in the promised land, according to what the Most High said. Even Moses, whose job it was because of his anger issues, y'all was like, yeah, bro, you ain't gonna make it. Yeah, this ain't for you. Make sure your complaining isn't lengthening the time on your journey. Because at least the Israelites had an excuse. Because the Israelites' excuse is, for 400 years, Yah had been silent. They had an excuse because they didn't have the scriptures or prophets. They had an excuse because they didn't have the Comforter, the Holy Spirit. They didn't have a large number of miracles to draw on like we do. We can look at our yesterday to see a miracle. We can look at our last week, our last month, our last year. The Israelites only knew oppression for 400 years. All their family ever knew was the Egyptians hate us and whip us and beat us and we build stuff for them. And I guess pots of meat. They didn't have a large number of miracles to draw on like we do. Let us not forget all that he has done for us. All the Red Seas that he allowed us to cross. And I might add, on dry ground. And again, them same folks that couldn't swim, that needed a miracle to get across, because if it wasn't no big deal, they could have just walked across or swam across, if they were just expert Michael Phelps swimmers. But obviously there was a problem and they needed a miracle to get through. And they're trying to go back. There is no way back. It's blocked off. And Yah has blocked off so many things in our lives and we keep crying to trying to go back. We need to put a restraining order on our past because there's nothing for us there. And again, there was nothing in Egypt. That country was destroyed. There was 10 natural disasters that destroyed it and devalued the property. There is no government in place. And they were trying to go back. But again, we do the same thing. And again, at least the Israelites had an excuse. We hear Yah every day. They had generations that never heard of him. Let's make sure that our complaining doesn't take us 40 years to get to our promise. Thank you, Father, for adding a blessing to the reading of the word.